5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BS 3615 Destinations to Manila International Airport in Philippines. On behalf of your safety, please sit accordingly and fasten your seatbelt. Thank you and enjoy your flight. Hey guys, we just landed in the Philippines.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to learn what Ajana has taught us.
Yes, we will go to every place of colonization: Chinese, Indian, Spanish, Dutch, British, and America.
The colonization began in Philippines in the Southeast Asian country. Briefly, let's talk about colonization. Colonization, by definition, is the control by one power over the dependent area or people. The concept of colonization closely linked to the imperialism that one policy or ethos of using power of another nation that under their colonial power.
So the first thing that I would like to talk about is the Chinese colonial power. As I am here in the Chinatown of the Philippines, there are many Chinese architects, art, as we can see these, and culture of people, which come from the Chinese influence from the period of Spanish colonization time. For example, every Chinese New Year in the Philippines, many people were wearing the local costume, like this. And I believe that he can give more detail about the Chinese colonial power.
Since the early 15th century, China and the Philippines were trading partners. During the Spanish colonizations, as Chinese merchants settled in Manila, their population grew rapidly because of the intermarriage between the Chinese and local Filipinos. Consequently, many locals converted to Catholic. The Chinese existence in the Philippines was seen as a threat to the Spanish colonial power, so they tried to massacre the Chinese. But then the Spanish could not reject the fact that Chinese had risen Philippines' economy and trade at its peak. The Chinese earned a living by trading silk, tobacco, and fruit. They became the wealthy class in society, which they created their own community, which was the first Chinatown called Binondo. Later, during the American colonization period, the Chinese were regarded as aliens living. However, their descendants were given the opportunity to choose whether to hold citizenship of either Chinese or Filipinos. After all, the relationship between Chinese and the Filipinos were going great. When the Japanese tried to occupy the Philippines, the Chinese fought against the Japanese alongside the Filipinos. When the Philippines was granted independence, the Chinese had helped to rebuild the nation. At the time, Chinese in the Philippines was considered not aliens anymore, as their long ancestry could trace back. From food to architecture, the Philippines is clearly influenced from the Chinese since the period of colonization until the present day.
And now we are in front of the Dutch church, which showing that Dutch also have influence in the Philippines. 1600 is the beginning of the 50 years of contact in the form of recurring contest between Dutch adventurer and trader and the Spanish Philippines. In the American period, economics and political connection between the Philippines and the Netherlands began to slowly unfold. The growth of trade and investment in the 1990s may even be called explosive. The Netherlands is the major exploration destination and investor in the Philippines. In the last quarter of the 20th century, thousands of Filipinos, mainly women, moved to the Netherlands. Many of them settled permanently, although smaller in magnitude. A counterflow to the Philippines of Dutch traders, businessmen, priests, development workers, and others developed during this period. In terms of tobacco and general merchandise traders, the Consul of the Netherlands given the negligible commercial contact in the 19th century. It may seem amazing that the Kingdom of Netherlands maintained a consulate in Manila from 1866 onward. This was an honorary position, which was upgraded to a full-time diplomatic function only in the 1930s. The trader consul remained virtually the sole Dutch resident until 1900.
And here I am in front of the Furrish View, which is remind me about the London Eye of the Britain. Okay, so to be talking about the British Empire occupied the Spanish colonial capital of Manila. The British wants to use Manila as an entente for trade in the regions, particularly with China. The British occupations aimed as a part of the peace settlement of the 7-Year War. As a war progressed, the neutral Spanish government became concerned that string of major French lords at the hand of the British were becoming a threat to Spanish interests. So, by an ancillary secret convention, Spain became hurried, committing to making a preparations for war against Britain. So, Britain first declared war against Spain on 4 July 1762, and in the same year, on the 18 January 1762. Spain influenced their own declarations of war against Britain. King George III of the Britain instructed to take an advantage of existing war with Spain that Britain might be able to assure post-war mercantile expansions. Next, the Manila was one of the most important trading cities in Asia during this period, and the British East India Company wants to extend its influence over the archipelago.
There was a time that Germany had an ambition to annex the Philippines from Spain. It was in the 1890s, and Germany had started to gain more colonies. In the 1890s, during the outbreak of Spanish-American War, a German squadron arrived in Manila Bay. The German emperor expected an American defeat, with Spanish left in the significantly weak position for the revolutionary and capture Manila, making it easy for Germany occupation. As the Filipinos declared their independence in June 12, the number of German vessels arriving in Manila increased. However, Germany's interest was cut short when the Treaty of Paris was signed, formally giving the Philippines to the United States.
Hispanic influence is based on indigenous and European tradition. Folk dance, music, and literature have remained intact in the 21st century. They were introduced from Spain and Mexico in the 16th century and can be regarded as largely Hispanic constitution, which have remained in the Philippines for centuries. The name of the Philippines comes from the King of Spain, King Philip II, which given by the Spanish explorer Ruiz Lopez. Throughout the colonial period, the name Filipinas or the Philippines was used and became the official name of the Philippines. The Philippines is largely a Roman Catholic country in a Buddhist Islamic bowl of Southeast Asia. Like Thailand, it has a troubled history with a minority Islamic people, although a heavily westernized population and culture. The Philippines is one of the two predominantly Roman Catholic countries in Asia. The other is
East Timor. All major Roman Catholic holy holidays are observed as official national holiday in the Philippines. Spanish Mexican culture and Christianity has influenced the custom and traditions of the Philippines. Every year on the third Sunday of January, the Philippines celebrate the festival of Santo Nino, which the largest is held on Cebu City. The most common languages spoken inside the Philippines today are English and Filipino, which is based on Tagalog. Spanish was an official language of the country until the change of government in the 1987, which led to Spanish being dropped as an official language for political reasons.
ओ नीवी नीवी आंखों को झुका के रख ले गोरे गोरे गालों को छुपा के रख ले
As I am now dressed like an Indian, Indian Filipinos refer to Filipinos of Indian descent who have historical connection with and have established themselves in what is now the Philippines, including intermarriage between Indian and the local population. For at least 2 millennia before the arrival of the Spanish, Philippines was ruled by Hindu kings called Rajas and Pramukhas. Indians came as traders, introduced Hinduism to the native of the Philippines. During the 17 Years' War, sepoy troops from British India arrived with the British expedition and occupation between the 1762 and 1764. When the British withdrew, many of the sepoy or the army privates mutinied and refused to leave. However, Indian business people started to arrive in larger numbers during 1930s and 1940s in the American colonial period. In terms of the relationship between the Philippines and India, their diplomatic relation was established in 1949. India maintained an embassy in Manila, whilst the Philippines maintained one in New Delhi. Later, they signed a treaty of friendship on 11 July 1952. As they were English-speaking democratic stalwarts with shared experience of Western colonialism, India has supported the Philippines' position on world trade, labor, and to become a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council from 2005 to 2006. For more than a decade, the Philippines and India have continuously held bilateral negotiations assessing their progress on trade, investment, economics, technical, scientific, and technical cooperation. And with the world's exponential growth in digitization and globalization, both countries have emerged as frontline service sector in the business process outsourcing industry.
Yeah, an American soldier, an American.
To talk about the Spanish-American War, the Americans' colonial power in Philippines start from the Spanish-American War. Briefly, there were three main lessons that the war erupted from. Firstly, is the American growing the imperial power. Second, was the sinking of U.S. Marine. And the last was the country under the Spanish rule, especially Cuba. That's they was the independent. So, the first, we need to know that America didn't aim directly to Philippines, but to Cuba, along with the Philippines that they were under the Spanish rule. So, both want independence from Spain. To have a briefly information, the lessons from war were many, but there were two immediate one, which is the American support for the ongoing struggle for Cuban and Filipinos against Spanish rule, and the mysterious explosions of battleships U.S. Marine in Havana Harbor. Next is the Battle of Manila Bay in the 1st of May in 1898. It was the final battle of the war, the defeat of Spanish Pacific Fleet by the U.S. Navy, the resulting in the fall of Philippines and contributing to the final U.S. victory in the Spanish-American War. Americans returned to Philippines in the Battle of Manila in 1945. It was the battle that fight over Japan's and US to claim the city of Manila. The result was the victory of American, but Manila, as known as once of the beautiful city, was completely a destruction after the battles. The Philippines Declaration of Independence in the 12th of June in 1898. It was the uprising rebellions of the intellectuals and the middle class began calling for independence. In 1832, the KKK Secret Revolutionary Society, political organization independence of the Philippines, who was a member, grew rapidly. They started the rebellions, and later, in 1897, there was the revolutionary were driven into the southeast of Manila. The leader like Aquinado see no ways of winning the Spanish, so they go negotiate the pact called the Pact of Bayagna-Bato. In exchange for financial compensations and a promise of reform in the Philippines, Aquinado and his general would accept exile in Hong Kong. The rebellion leader departed and the Philippine Revolution's temporality was at an end. Next, the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris signed on 10 of December in 1898, it was a peace agreement between Spain and United States that ended the Spanish-American War. Under the treaty, Cuba gained independence from Spain and the United States gained possession of Philippines. With these documents of the treaty, the U.S. bought the Philippines from Spain for $20 million and promised Philippines to practice their own sovereignty, but later, Philippines became colonized by America. In the World War I, the Philippines was dragged to World War I. It was the Great War as it was known before 1939, simply because United States joined the war in 1917. By this period, the Philippines funded and built a submarine named USS Rizzo, flown by Jose Rizzo for the U.S. Navy. Unfortunately, it failed because the U.S. did not need much of a submarine and they mostly used it in the Atlantic, not Pacific, where the Philippines located. One of the more things in the Philippines did for America during the Great War was the drafting of Filipinos for the U.S. National Army. The colonial government has the quota set to 15,000. The Philippines provide 25,000 known as the Philippines National Guard or PNG. However, the PNG never saw actions. Philippines who did set foot in Europe during the war were enlisted in the American Expeditionary Force or AEF. So, the most famous of these Philippine soldier was Tomas Mario Cradio, who died at the Battle of Chateau Thierry in June 1918. He was the first Filipinos casualty of the war, followed by about 50 more Filipinos dead until the First World War, and in the same year. In the World War II, Japanese invaded the Philippines on the 8th of December in 1941. 10 hours after the attack of Pearl Harbor, the American aircraft were severely damaged in the initial Japanese attack. Manila, declared an open city to prevent its destruction, was occupied by the Japanese on January 2 in 1942. After a few months of difficult fighting with the Japanese, American General Douglas MacArthur escaped the Philippines on the night of 11th of March in 1942 to Australia. There remains 76,000 American and Filipino defenders. Eventually, surrendered on the 9th of April in 1942. The campaign came to conclusions on the 8th of May in 1942 with Japanese control over the Philippines. Fightings continued until Japan's formal surrender on the September of 2 in 1945, making the end of World War II. So, Philippines has suffered great loss of life and tremendous physical destruction by the time of the war. An estimated 1 million Filipinos has been killed from all causes. During the occupations, the Japanese military authority immediately began organizing a new government structure in the Philippines. The puppet republic was headed by President Jose Lovelace. The only political party allowed during the occupations was the Japanese organized Calibarpi. Nonetheless, most of Philippines remained loyal to United States and war crimes committed by the force of the Empire of Japan against surrender Allied force, and civilians were documented. Throughout the Philippines, more than 1,000 women, some being under the age of 18, were imprisoned as comfort women keeping sexual slavery for Japanese military personnel. There were locations that the women were held, which they call a comfort stations, for example, Behe Napula. However, there was an extensive Philippine resistance movement which opposed the Japanese. They collaborated with active underground and guerrilla activity that increased over the year. Select units of resistance would go to be reorganized and equipped as units of the Philippines Army and Constabulary. The United States government officially grant payments and benefits to various ethnicities who have fought with the Allies by the war end. Some 277 separate guerrilla units make up 260,715 individuals were officially recognized and having fought in the resistance of the movement.
After we watched the video about the colonial power of the Philippines, now let me explain you about how the colonial begins. It begins by Ferdinand Magellan. In 1521, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer who was serving the Spanish crown, landed in Samar Island on his voyage to circumvent the globe. He explored the island and named it Archipelago of San Lazaro. Unfortunately, Magellan was killed during a rebellion led by a Datu named Lapu-Lapu in Mactan Island. However, Spain continued to send expeditions to the island for financial gain, and Spain ruled the Philippines for 356 years. In 1565, King Philip II, the King of Spain, appointed Miguel Lopez de Legazpi as the first Governor General of the Philippines. Legazpi chose Manila to be the capital city because of its natural harbor. Spain's legacy was the conversion of the people to Catholicism and the creation of the privileged land class. This caused the abuses and suppression of the Spaniards. A propaganda movement emerged with the aim of for equality between Filipinos and Spanish. Finally, Dr. Jose Rizal, the propagandist, was arrested and executed in 1896. This event gave fresh momentum of Filipino rebels to fight against Spain. And as I am talking about Dr. Jose Rizal, next we're gonna look in detail about him and other leaders of the Philippines.
This part we're gonna begin with the leaders. There are 5 important leaders that made Philippines today. First, start with Jose Rizal. Jose Rizal was born from a middle-class family judging from Spanish feudalism. His family was quite rich, so he was able to access in education, which he became one of the intellectual medical students in Spain. Throughout his life, he had witnessed the suffering of Filipinos under the colonial power of Spain, which led him to write the book named Noemi Tangeri, which condemned the Catholic Church in Philippines for its promotion of Spanish colonialism. And the next book that he wrote is The Range of Greeds. The Range of Greeds had explored the actual real Filipino society at that time. Both of his books were translated into both Filipino and Spanish language. And from this book, Filipinos that had read it start the rebel. Although his rebels were quite a peaceful rebel, he was considered a national hero of Philippines. However, he was executed and shot, which made him a martyr of Philippine Revolution, and he was accused of being a traitor and rebellion. After 2 years of his death, the Philippines won the independence from Spain. The next leader is Andres Bonifacio. Andres Bonifacio was a revolutionary leader of Philippines, which after the execution of Dr. Jose Rizal in July 1892, Bonifacio decided that Philippines would only achieve independence through revolutionary. On July 7, he founded the secret society named Katipunan, or KKK, which opened both peasants and middle class to access, that employed Masonic ritual to impact an air of sacred mystery. It integrated itself into the community by setting up mutual aid society and education for poor. By 1896, the Katipunan or KKK had over 30,000 members and functioned at the national, provincial, and municipal level. Also, in the same year of 1896, Bonifacio proclaimed Filipino independence on August 23, 1896. This time, the Spaniards moved against him, forcing his flight to the Marikina Mountains. While other forces headed by Emilio Aguinaldo were more successful and won control over some town. When Bonifacio tried to reign him, Aguinaldo ordered him arrested and charged with treason and sedition. He was tried and convicted by his enemy and executed in May 10, 1897. Today, he was regarded as national hero as well. The next leader is Emilio Aguinaldo. Aguinaldo was the member of KKK with Bonifacio. Aguinaldo arrested Bonifacio, imprisoned, and eventually executed him on May 10, 1897. After Bonifacio's death, he led the KKK, and eventually the group was forced to retreat into the mountain in the face of Spanish attack. Ultimately, he entered into an accord with the Spaniards, agreeing to exile to Hong Kong in exchange for 400,000 pesos, referred to the Pact of Piagnabato. Soon after his arrival there, Aguinaldo purchased the weapons his troops would require to continue the struggles. After the U.S. declared war on Spanish, Aguinaldo saw a possibility that the Philippines might achieve its independence. The U.S. hoped instead that Aguinaldo would lend his troops to its effort against Spanish. He returned to Manila in May 19, 1898 and declared Philippines independence on June 12. When it became clear that the United States had no interest in the liberation of the islands, Aguinaldo's force remained apart from the U.S. troops. On January 1, 1899, following the meeting of the Constitutional Convention, Aguinaldo was proclaimed President of the Philippines Republic. Not surprisingly, the United States refused to recognize Aguinaldo's authority, and on February 4, 1899, he declared war on the U.S. force in the islands. After his capture on March 23, 1901, Aguinaldo agreed to swear allegiance to the United States and then left the public life. His dream of Philippines independence came true on July 4, 1946. He died in Manila in 1964. For the last leader is Ferdinand Marcos. Ferdinand Marcos was the 10th president of Philippines from 1965 to 1986. Ferdinand Marcos ruled over Philippines for nearly 20 years. Elected to office in 1965 and re-elected in 1969. He retained his hold on power by declaring martial law in 1972, with full support from Washington. During his military dictatorship, he implemented a regime of arrested without warrant, of torture and extrajudicial murder. Greatest achievement of Ferdinand Marcos was in the field of infrastructure development and international diplomacy. His opponent was Aquino Jr., which he had assassinated. Marcos held on to the presidency until 1986, when his people arose against his dictatorial rule led by Corazon Aquino, or his rival wife, and he was forced to flee. He died on September 28, 1989, in exile in Honolulu, Hawaii.
As we already mentioned about Bonifacio and Agudano, the leader of the KKK movement, now we're gonna take a look about the two propaganda movement in the Philippines. The Kapunan or KKK was started by Andres Bonifacio. The purpose of this group was to gain reform through peaceful means at first, but after witnessing the assassination of the national hero like Jose Rizal, Bonifacio was convinced that the only way of the Philippines' independence was through the revolution. The other movement is Moro Islamic Liberation Front or MILF. It is the largest militant organization in the Philippines and seeks autonomy for Filipino Muslims. In 1977, organization split to MNLF or Moro National Liberal Front. The MILF control the territory of southern Philippines. They want to separate from the Philippines having independent state for their group Moros. It has generally focused on political negotiation, but it has a significant history of terrorism and militancy. In 2014, the MILF concludes peace negotiations with the Philippines government for an autonomous region in the southern Philippines, to be called the Bangsamoro. The MILF is in the process of gradual disarmament. Next, we're gonna look how other countries influence the culture of the Philippines. Let's start with India. According to the National Geographic DNA study, 3% of the average Filipinos' genes are South Asian origin. In 2016, there are over 50,000 Punjabi Indian alone in the Philippines, not including illegal Indian Punjabi immigrants and other Indian ethnic groups in the Philippines. There are also the certain industries which are Indian origin, especially the largest workforce, Indophil Textile, Global Steel, Hinduja Global, and Aegis People Support. Moreover, traces of Hindu in the Philippines are found in religions, job, writing, language, and custom. To describe, there was Hindu element in the religious belief of the ancient Filipinos, and the name of their god came from India. For example, Bathala, the supreme god of the pre-Spanish Tagalog, is identified as Indra, the shape of the Vedic god, resemble the Hindu trinity of God, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. In terms of the textiles, the sarong and the putong of ancient Filipino are from India. For about literature, popular Filipino epics like Daragan, Indraprata, At Sulaiman, Lam-ang, Ibalon, and Hat and Alim was inspired by Mahapatara and other Hindu epics. Spain cultural influence in terms of the religions. The Philippines is one of two predominantly Roman Catholic countries in Asia, apart from East Timor. About 90% of the population are Catholics, about 5% are Muslim, and 5% practice other religions, and those with no religions. All major Roman Catholic holidays are observed as official national holidays in the Philippines. Spanish, Mexican culture and Christianity has also influenced the custom and tradition of the Philippines. For language, The most common language spoken in the Philippines today are English and Filipino, which is based on Tagalog. Spanish was an official language of the country until the change of government in 1987, which led to Spanish being dropped an official language for political reasons. The Spanish spoken in the Philippines today has a great affinity with Mexican Spanish. Filipino Spanish contains many Mexican Spanish loanwords of Nahuatl origin which were first incorporated into Mexican Spanish and which do not exist in European Spanish. Various Filipino languages have significantly assimilated aspects of the Spanish language and contain thousands of loanwords, numerous words, and some grammatical concepts of the Spanish vocabulary are used in Chavacano, Cebuano, Tagalog, Bicolano, and Ilocano. In terms of festivities and holidays, the 1st of January is a New Year's Day as every country around the world. And every year on the 3rd Sunday of January, the Philippines celebrated the festival of the Santo Niño or Holiday Child Jesus, which held in Cap Cebu City. In March or April, people would celebrate Semana Santa or Easter. 31st October to 2 November is the Day of the Dead, All Souls Days and All Saints Day, where families spend much of their 3 days and 3 evenings visiting their ancestral grave, showing respect and honoring the departed relative by fasting, decorating and offering prayer. On 24th December is the Christmas Eve and 25th December is the Christmas Day.
So next we have to know about British has an influence on the Philippines. So British opened the Philippines to the outside world. Next, British introduced the English language and free local elections. And the music and dance of the British also influenced the Philippines, as we can see in this video. Next, some social custom came from the British, like the picture in this slide. Also, the British taught Filipinos to have to shake hands in the public. So, we have to learn about that Americans has an influence on the Philippines. The English language that Americans have an influence on the Philippines, that English as the second national language in the Philippines, because it influenced the Tagalog language, like Philippines people were speaking Tangis, which is mean the Tagalog combined with the English language. It's like mixing English word with the Tagalog. For example, cake, cookie, computer, X-ray, biscuits. So the clothing also of the American also have an influence of the Philippines, like American clothing on the Filipino culture. For example, as we can see in this picture, the polo shirt, tennis shoe, the short skirt, the dress, high heel, something like this picture. And also the food. American restaurants popular in the Philippines, for example, McDonald's, KFC, Dunkin' Donuts, and Starbucks.
In the present time relationship, British and the Philippines relation, important people from the UK has been visiting the Philippines, including the 3 members of the Philippines royal family, Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, Princess Anne, and Prince Andrew, Duke of York. Moreover, members of the British Parliament had visited, including the British Foreign Secretary, Sir Geoffrey Howe, and British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond visited in 1986, 1988, and 2016 in order. Filipino Foreign Secretary became the first Philippines minister to visit Britain in 1989. The UK is currently the largest European investor in the Philippines, which having the tourists about 90,000 yearly. British helped the Filipinos in many ways. The UK government also spent in the region of £2 million per year of funding to facilitate scientific collaboration with the Philippines. The UK provided more than £70 million of humanitarian aid to Philippines during Typhoon Haiyan. In cases of military relations, the Philippines sided with the Allies in the Second World War together with Great Britain. The UK plays an important part in Mindanao peace process. The Philippines airport also designed by British company. For the US and Philippines relation, US assistance to Philippines in many ways. The US government's goal in the Philippines are to strengthen democratic governance and support government effort to promote inclusive development and contribute to security and development cooperation in Indo-Pacific. The U.S. gives Navy support to the Philippines issue on the West Philippine Sea to save the Philippines property claim and international waterway from the ownership of China that claimed the whole sea was theirs. The U.S. sent the Navy to sea in order to threaten the Chinese spreading power throughout the surrounding countries of the sea. About the war on drugs. Drug war refers to the drug policy of Duterte, which aimed at the neutralization of illegal drug personalities nationwide. The people who become the suspect are both the users and dealers. By the time Trump visited Manila in 2017, about 4,000 people were killed under this policy. By November 2018, about 5,000 suspect drug users and dealers died during the police operation, according to the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. But this does not include the thousands of others killed by unidentified gunmen. Donald Trump, the current president of the United States, also has a great relationship with the President Duterte of the Philippines. After a highly anticipated meeting in Manila in 2017, based on BBC, at that private meeting, Trump reportedly told Duterte that, "I just wanted to congratulate you because I am hearing about the unbelievable job on the drug problem. Many countries have the problem. We have the problem, but what a great job you are doing."